Hello, beautiful souls. Welcome back to Level Up with Gal podcast show where you are able to show up as your true authentic self and learn how to level up in your life. I'm your host, Gal Perino. Today we have a special, beautiful guest who has amazing energy. Just stay tuned and wait. Joining the show, we're going to be talking about all things spiritual. So before you say too woo, sit tight and we're going to dive in. So please welcome Maurice Sinclair from Ancient Made Modern to the show, who is the expert on this topic. Hello and welcome, Maurice. How are you doing and feeling today?
I'm doing great and I'm feeling good. I'm well rested. I've eaten. I'm good. I'm good. It's a sunny day outside. Yeah. How are you
Awesome.
doing today?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much for asking. I don't get that asked often, so I appreciate that.
Of course.
So I love that. So welcome and tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Uh, uh, my name's Maurice. I consider myself a channel for both information and healing. Kind of
Mm,
this is like the general sense, but technically, if you want to break it down, I'm a Reiki Master. I am a medium, a psychic, Shamanic Practitioner, and an Akashic healer. So I do a kind of a plethora of things. And I do some other things that I haven't yet offered yet. I'm just kind of like working on myself and developing my gifts as they go. But yeah, overall, I like to just tell people that I'm a channel for information and healing, which means I can just kind of, I'm like a receptacle for non-physical things. Yeah,
I love that. And I like that you do so much. So a little bit there and whatever people need, right?
yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. So tell us how your journey started. How did you get to where you are today and doing all these awesome things?
So I'll try to condense this part. So during a business trip to India, I got very sick.
Mm,
And through that process of healing, which took about 2.5 years of healing myself, because the doctors couldn't help me, they couldn't figure it out.
mm,
I uh, I gained a lot of sensitivity, both to yes foods, but also to everything. And I started realizing that I'm kind of receiving a lot of information, downloads, and things. I was pretty confused about it, but the first thing that I was led to, because people kept kind of saying it, that they were kind of probably being divine messengers themselves, but they're like, your journey, it sounds like you're like a shaman. It sounds like shamanic. Like a lot of I've heard that many shaman either will go through some sort of like major injury before they awaken or illness. And that kind of sparked something in me. So I started to look up shamanism, started to read deeply into it. And so I started practicing shamanic journey, shamanic drumming, things like that, just to kind of like dip my toe and kind of maybe get a grip on some of the senses that I was getting. And that led me to kind of discovering more and more about myself and my non-physical spiritual guides. I'm not
mm.
sure if that concept is introduced on this show yet, but I realized that I have a team of non-physical guides all around me that are always helping me, and I started working hand in hand with them. I guess another pivotal moment was my great grandmother passed away. She was like my mother. She was like important to me. She passed away, and one day when I was kind of just sobbing at the kitchen table, uh, she came to me, and she put this deep warmth in my heart, which told me this is the first time that I was like, oh, contact doesn't cease when people pass away. That's like the moment that I was like, that I had that realization myself, that you kind of hear it in passing, but this is when I experienced it for the first time myself. And from that moment on, she kind of took me by the hand and just led me down literally a computer rabbit hole. And from there, I discovered Reiki. So I
Mm.
started kind of just like looking into it myself, just trying to do it myself. And then I hit a wall. I felt like I'm not getting as far as I need to. So then I went to a practitioner to get attuned and trained in how to do it and get all the certifications and stuff. And from there, I was doing that for years. Didn't intend to do it for people really. It was just kind of a self-development thing this whole time. This is back into now we're at because I got sick in 2014. Now we're probably at like 2016, 17 where this is happening. And then fast forward to 2019, my gifts were really hitting a peak. And I was like, I need to do something about this. I don't know, like I can't keep doing this myself. I need to find other people that I can practice with. So I literally hopped on the computer and I typed in, I remember it was uh, psychic development circles is what I typed. And what
Mm.
popped up was a mediumship circle. It's the only thing that fit in my schedule at the time. and a mediumship like practice circle where other mediums could practice together. And I joined that. I did an online one because I couldn't make any of the in-person ones. And alongside my job, I was doing that, and I learned immediately when I first joined that circle that, oh, I'm already a medium. I can already do this. It worked the instant I tried, and I was like, oh, okay, is this what I've been doing this whole time? I just didn't understand who and what I was talking to, and it gave me framework. It helped me understand the specifics of who I'm talking to. Made me able to see them. It built like a frame around this kind of like swirl of information that was coming into me. And then 2019, that brings us to 2020. And 2020, the job I was working at shut down because COVID. And I just dove deeply into my spiritual work because I was like, what else am I going to do? And I tried working again as a cook, because like that was like one of my main professions that I thought I was going to be doing for my life. And I hated it. I realized like this isn't me anymore. That I really despised it. And then one day they stopped calling me in to work, and I was like, okay, well, I got to do something. And during the circles, my great grandfather specifically would come in all the time. My late great grandfather, and he would tell me that I needed to be doing this for work. And I kept brushing him off, like, no, 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 I don't want to charge. I don't want to do that. And this was like 6 different times through different people telling me the same message. And then finally, when that job ended, I just relinquished, and I was like, okay, like fine, let me just try and see what happens. And that's how I started doing it professionally. I started doing first just mediumship readings. I did hundreds of them for free because I had to prove to my ego that it was actually working, just for people that I didn't know outside of the circle. And then I transitioned into doing it professionally. And then I figured after a while, I was like, well, I've been doing shamanic journey for like a long time. So I started doing that. I said, well, I also am a Reiki master. So I started doing this. So I just added in the things I collected along the way to my services. And yeah, and here I am now.
Wow, freaking amazing journey. Thank you for sharing, bringing that in. And I just want to keep listening to you. And I'm like, tell me more. So if I feel that way, the listeners feel the same way. So wow, what an amazing journey. So can you explain a little bit what does it mean by like a shamanic journey and services? Like what does that mean so people can understand?
So when you journey shamanically, I'm going to explain it from my perspective.
Mhm.
You travel outside of your body,
Mm,
and you go to one of three main areas of this. You can call it the spiritual realm. Some people like to call it alternate reality. There is an upper realm, a middle realm, and a lower realm. The middle realm is basically the spiritual overlay of our physical world.
mm,
That makes sense. You can kind of compare it to like the astral realm,
mhm,
like that kind of thing. When people astral travel, the upper realm is very ethereal,
mm,
angelic kind of beings of light and love uh, tend to be there. This is where they frequent,
mhm,
and it's like it's very bright. It's very kind of crystalline and airy. This is the area that you might go if you're wanting to heal or see things from kind of a higher perspective. The middle realm, it's like if you are trying to solve for earthly problems. I mean, you can do that in any of the realms, but like I like to go here when I'm trying to, for example, find a physical object. Do you know what I mean? They try to locate a physical object. I'll travel to this realm. Now, the lower realm is interesting, and I think probably my favorite, my most frequent. It's the realm of all of the natural entities of the world.
mhm,
So, natural landscapes, the overarching spirit of all the elements. So, for example, the spirit of fire, the spirit of water, um, kind of like fairy type beings, animals. This is where they will frequent. Though these beings can kind of go between all three of these levels. This is typically about where they stay. And during a shamanic journey, I will. It's truly like an augmented reality immersive experience. The journey itself becomes the answers to the question. So when I do shamanic journeys, I ask people to ask me usually 3 questions, and I
mhm,
journey on their behalf. Every little bit of stimulus that comes into me as I'm going through the journey becomes the answers to the questions. I'll encounter different beings. They'll be the beings that belong to the whoever I'm reading for, and they'll come in and they'll give direct answers. They'll take essentially take me by the hand and take me to different places, show me different things that helped answer the questions. And yeah, that's about it. Like it'll consist of me walking out of my body, and usually there'll be some sort of opening in the room that I'm in, and I'll walk through it, and that begins the journey. And then it's just hands off from there. I'm just kind of experiencing it and voicing it. Either it's written or I will do it audibly. And did I answer the question, or did you ask me?
Yeah, no, you did. That's amazing.
Mm,
Yeah.
thank you.
Wow. Thank you for bringing that in and, enlightening us because I've never heard of all that. And that's incredible. So you do that and then you do the Reiki work. So if someone wanted a session with you,
Mhm.
to rebalance their chakras, you can do that for them as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I love that. It's like, what do you need from Maurice, right? And here you go.
Yeah, I'm like a Swiss Army knife. Yeah, and kind of do a bunch of things. And I'm not really limited to, 'cause I use these names for modalities,
Mhm.
it's just really to help people understand the basis of what I do, but I really kind of work outside of these things. And that is to say, for example, you might ask for a Reiki session, and there ends up being both shamanic and mediumistic elements to it as well. That's not really limited. Like you might come it's really dependent on what your intention is. So if you're wanting healing, you might ask for a Reiki session, but other things might come through to provide the healing as well. I'm just the channel. I just kind of allow whatever it is that needs to come in to come in.
Wow, that's badass. That's so cool. Like, that's how you should start your descriptions. Badass services. Here we go.
I appreciate that. Yeah, it's interesting to hear people say things like that because I'm like, I'm just following the breadcrumbs, I'm just
Mm,
kind of going where I'm led. And it's interesting where it's led me. But
yeah.
once you relinquish and surrender to what you're being asked to do, your life gets kind of amazing, you
Mhm.
know? And this has been one of the biggest lessons on my spiritual journey.
I love that. And even just hearing you talk, like the love out of your voice and your tone, if I feel that, people feel that when they're going to be listening to this. So thank you. Wow, what an
Of
amazing
course.
journey you've been on through the ups and downs, I'm sure, right? It
Oh
wasn't always
yeah.
up.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. The whole lot of downs with the ups. Yeah. It wasn't just a smooth, happy-go-lucky. No, I've had my ass handed to me
Mm.
over and over again. But that's built me. That's gotten me to where I am. But without that, I don't think I'd be able to speak with this amount of love, as you say.
I like that because if people listen, like, okay, Maurice is successful today, but there is part of the journey that's not fun, because some people see someone who's doing well and doing something they love and they think it was like a snap of a finger and you got to where you are. And that's not the case whatsoever.
Mm-mm. Nope.
Yeah.
Nope. But you'll find that everything in your life, even outside of the spiritual or whatever the topic is that
Mhm.
you're pursuing, everything ends up being kind of a like a training module. The phrase that you'll hear me say a lot is that like everything is training.
Mhm.
Whatever it is that you're doing, you'll find that everything is training, and it never stops.
Mhm.
So yeah, everything can be taken. As I'm not being condescending, I'm not belittling the difficulty of the process because it can be absolutely heartbreaking in so many ways, but um, it also provides you the opportunity to be able to grow into something completely new. So,
I love that. So what would you say to someone who's like, how do I know where to start? Like, what do I want to do Reiki first? Do I want to tap into shamanic? What would you say to someone like that?
ooh. So I used the phrase a couple minutes ago about like following the breadcrumbs. I think
Mhm.
that's the first step is like follow where you're led. Don't try to force it. There's going to be something that lights you up or interests you the most.
Mhm.
Walk in that direction. Trying to follow some sort of template, especially anybody else's template, it's just not going to work. Everyone is different. Just speaking for myself, what led me to, for example, the first kind of spiritual practice that I got into was shamanic practice. That was as a result of me getting sick and me kind of hearing this repeated message through other people, but also through not like books and things that I would kind of slip onto at websites and things that felt resonant to me and felt relevant to my specific story. And
Mm.
so I just walked in that direction. So I guess the first step for people is just walking in the direction that feels right. Um, One thing I will say, and this is not some plug for Reiki, because to be honest with you, like though I use it, it's just a hammer in a toolbox to me. You know, it's just one facet. Like I'm not attached to any modality really. It's just kind of how I do things. But for people who are wanting, for example, some like energetic framework, just kind of like understanding and basic understanding of how energy moves throughout the body and chakras and things like that. Reiki is a nice place to start, but it is a nice place to start. You know, it is kind of like it's like if you have a blank sheet of paper,
Mhm.
it provides like some that you draw a square on a piece of paper, and now you can fill it in with a bunch of other things and a bunch of other modalities. So um, I find that a lot of people end up starting with Reiki, uh, but it also depends on your specific wants and desires. So, for example, if your number one motivator is wanting to be able to uh, communicate more effectively with non-physical beings, with your ancestors or guides in spirit, I would say start with mediumship, because that's
Mhm.
essentially what that is, being able to communicate with non-physical beings. And yeah, that's what I'll say about that.
So definitely have an intention, right? Is what I'm hearing. Have an intention and then see what works best for you.
Exactly. Start with the intention always.
Mhm.
That concept right there goes all the way up. And every little thing that I do, both within spiritual work and without, uh, I always begins with the intention. The intention powers everything.
I love that. So don't just fly by seat your pants and just hope something falls in your lap. Like, don't do that.
No, it's better to,
Yeah.
yeah, to at least come, if you don't come up with an intention,
Mhm.
wait for the intention to come to you. Yeah,
Mm.
it'll come.
Oh, I love that.
Ironically, if you intend it, yeah.
Right, right. And I like that you brought that in because people are gonna be like, Maurice, Gal, how do I make of intention? Like, what are you guys talking about? So I like that you
Mm,
said, like, hey, it will come. But, do you also feel it's important to create space so that intention can come? Because some people keep themselves so busy.
right. Oh, yeah, that's absolutely important. So actually, yeah, you know what? Let me edit it a little bit.
Hmm.
If you're wanting to get into some sort of spiritual practice, but you don't know where to start by meditating,
Mm.
because it's not to see meditation as a modality or it's just meditating in and of itself is, by definition for me anyway, my perspective, is finding ways to drown out outside stimulus.
Mhm.
Put a blindfold on, earplugs in if you have to, but like get quiet, get inwards, and like try to, as much as you can, ignore what's happening outside of you.
Mhm.
And whether this looks like you sitting in silence and oming, or whether this is you walking in nature, or whether this is you doing dishes or painting, whatever it is that you feel that you can do to shut that thinking mind off, do that, because
Mhm.
that's how you allow it in. That's how you create that space.
I like that. And I like the examples you gave because a lot of times people are like, you want me to sit for a
Mm.
couple minutes and do nothing? I can't scroll on social media. But what would you say someone's like, how do I start? Do I just do a couple minutes? Do I do 15 minutes? That sounds too much.
Honestly, when people ask me, I say start 2 minutes if you can. It honestly, it doesn't, the increment of time doesn't matter as long as you're building on it. The
Mm,
initial increment of time doesn't matter as long as you're building on it.
mhm,
You know, I usually recommend people start at 2 minutes.
mhm,
It's just pretty easy. But like sometimes for people who are like kind of really hyperactive, I'll be like, just start at 1 minute. And then, but like
mhm,
you have to do it though. You have to follow through, because if you do it for a minute and you're like, nah, it didn't work, and then take 4 days off, then try again, it's like you're moving real slow. If you're gonna start at a minute, 2 minutes, whatever, that's fine. But like you got to do it at least twice a day. Try to do it twice a day.
mhm,
Like in the morning and at night is best, because it's kind of easiest. You might wake up and then kind of like, oh, let me meditate, do that, and then kind of you're in bed about to go to sleep, meditate then, and then you might even meditate yourself into sleep, and just keep going. Just make it consistent, and you'll find that naturally you'll just end up going for longer as long as you do it frequently.
mhm.
You won't have to try to do it for longer. That'll just happen. People think that, oh, I'm gonna have to try, and it's like, no, no, no. That'll happen. All you need is consistency. All you need is dedication, and it'll end up happening for you. And then you kind of, like I like to kind of I don't always meditate. I'm
Mhm.
gonna go on record by saying that like I don't always meditate enough. But I do meditate every time, like before I do any spiritual work.
Mhm.
And I try to do it when I'm being real good. I'm doing it 3 times a day, but usually it's like it's around twice plus however many times I do it for work.
Mm. I like that you're like, I'm gonna be honest. It's not as much
Yeah.
as I probably should.
I'm a human too, so like I
Yeah.
get caught up in it too. But yeah, I try. I try. So like you don't have to be perfect, but you
Mhm.
at least want to do a couple times a day. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I like that you're just keeping it real. And I like that you say that you're human too, because so many times I hear from you say, oh, spiritual world, they're on a different level, because they're spiritually connected. Like, no, wait a minute. You are human too. You have ups and downs, you make mistakes. And sometimes you may not be consistent, and
Mhm.
that's life, right? You're a human,
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
you forgive yourself and you keep showing up though.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And honestly, to me, that's the most spiritual thing that you can do is embody your humans. These people
Mhm.
that try to like escape their humanity for the sake of spirituality, you're missing the point. Like you're not here to do that. You didn't choose to come into a body to like uh move beyond your humanity. You came here to fuse your spirituality with humanity. So for me, the more embodied and the more you are in your human experience, to me, that's the most spiritual thing that you can do. So I try to do that myself. Yeah.
Wow. I love that. So when you were going through your journey to get you to where you are today, did you have any experiences that was like, whoa, this is scary. This is too much for me. Maybe I should stop.
There's one specific time that popped into my head. Maybe another time will come when while I'm talking. But there was a while I was doing my series of just this free mediumship readings,
Mhm.
I read for this one woman, and her mother came in,
Mhm.
and she already looked kind of. Oh, there's another one I just thought of. But she already looked kind of like strange, like she was kind of glowing. She looked kind of like just kind of like a white outline, like a light blue kind of outline. I thought to myself like, all right, first of all, this is interesting. I've never seen anything like this. Come to realize, and like she didn't have any eyes, but the light was coming out of her eyes, kind of thing.
Wow.
And I came to realize as I was talking to her that, oh, she's she kept evolving after she passed. So she was like an advanced spirit. She was like the way that she looked, she was like kind of moving past uh her normal human soul self, if it's the
Mhm.
best way I can describe it. And the daughter kept asking how her mother passed.
Mm.
And because she never knew, it was a mystery.
Mhm.
And her mother kept telling me, like, I don't want to talk about that.
Wow.
And this is when I learned this lesson, and I kept pushing it because the daughter was pushing. She was so she
Yeah.
was just like she really wanted to know, and I was like, and I kept asking and asking and asking and asking, and until she got in my face, like she got in my face, and she was kind of like yelling at me,
Yeah.
screaming at me, the spirit, and like it scared me, like it actually like it kind of terrified me, like I'd never experienced something like that before. And I remember like I didn't read again for like a couple weeks because I was like, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. This kind of frightened me. um Eventually, obviously, I picked it back up, but the lesson there for me was these are not disembodied inanimate objects. These are people, these are souls, and they require respect and
Mm.
love and reverence the same way that any other living human would. And
Mhm.
when you cross that, like you don't cross that, you wouldn't cross that boundary with a person, with a physical person. And if you do, you know that there could be some sort of consequence or some sort of reaction. And this was where, like, when that point really hit home for me. And ever since then, like, I speak to them respectfully. I allow them to speak. I allow them to say what they need to say. I do my best not to fire off questions at them. I'll ask them questions, and then I'll kind of like back off and let them kind of speak freely. And they don't really hesitate to kind of like check me and kind of be like, well, like I'm still talking, so you know. And ever since then, like I'll be like, okay, yeah, go ahead, I'm sorry. Because sometimes I just want to sit there. Sometimes I just want to like revel in being imaged. Because spirits, they don't just walk around with like a holding an image, a physical image. Like
Mhm.
they do that for us. So
Ah.
in a mediumship reading, and like I might be seeing, oh, this person has black hair, blue eyes, whatever.
Mhm.
but they don't look like anything because they don't have physicality anymore. So sometimes they just like to revel in being imaged. Sometimes they'll just sit there and kind of like just kind of admire themselves, like, oh yeah, this is what I look like, kind of
Mhm.
thing. And rather than push them, like, please answer the questions, I just kind of let them flow and do. But another one, so in one of my second to last apartment that I lived in, come to find out that that place was quote unquote haunted, what people might say, and I'll clarify too because
Yeah.
um, there are essentially there are different levels of death, or
Mhm.
death, quote unquote. Like when you pass away, when you shed your physical body, you can either move all the way on, you pass all the way on, and then you've done your life review, you've gained all the lessons that you needed to from life,
Mhm.
and now you're just a kind of a healthy, happy spirit. But there are such a thing, and there's people that are going to disagree with me when I say this. Even my first mediumship teacher does not believe in this, but I've experienced it myself, so I entirely disagree.
Mhm.
There are things called bound spirits,
Mhm.
and these are spirits that, for one reason or the other, haven't passed on. They're kind of anchored to the earth. This
Mm.
is what people might use. They might use the term ghosts, for example. I don't really use that word, but like this is what people are saying when they speak of ghosts. And they're not always angry or bad. Sometimes they're just kind of hanging out. Sometimes they hang out by choice. Sometimes something happened which has disallowed them to move on. But sometimes they're not nice.
Mm.
Sometimes they're not nice,
Mm.
and they get trapped in the emotions that they were in when they passed away. So come to find out, there was a, a woman, a girl in the apartment that we were living in, that died of a drug overdose.
Mm.
Didn't know. No one told us. It was only when it was during the series of free readings that I was doing that I
Yeah.
read for somebody, but she happened to be a medium, and she kept asking like, do you know?" But she could just describe this woman. I was like, "No, I don't know who that is." And
Oh.
she was like, "Okay," and she pushed her aside, kept reading, and then at the end of the reading, she was like, "No, she's still here. She one of mine? I don't know." And then she starts describing. She's like, "No, no, no. Actually, she's there." And then she describes in intricacy how she passed, the nature of her relationship with her partner and her mother and all this stuff.
Mhm.
And I kind of was like, okay, interesting. And then I think it kind of scared her because she told me that she'd gone through something kind of similar with another disembodied spirit that kind of ruined her life. And I never heard from her again. And she never answered my texts or calls ever again. So I think that kind of
Oh.
that she was like, I don't want to involve myself with this. Which I was like, fine, okay, understandable. But I also didn't want to admit to myself that it was happening. So like I kind of pushed it aside. But the things that would happen in the apartment and in the apartment complex, and it was as if she was, I'm not going to go into a whole bunch of detail, but it was as if she was trying to pull herself back into the physical and avoiding passing over because she thought that she was going to be punished because of how she lived her life. This is what she thought as a spirit, that she was going to maybe go to hell or whatever. It
Mm.
didn't really work like that. But she would pull from the fearful energy of everyone else in the building. She would like create uh just chaos. She would like people who were especially susceptible to this stuff would she would like fill them with anger, make them have arguments, physical altercations, break things. It's crazy because like you would literally like kind of clear her from the space, and then immediately you'd hear like banging from the apartment next door. Yeah, she would it was crazy. So anyway, so I kind of didn't want to admit it, and then like a year later, completely separate person, a friend of mine, another medium, she was like, okay, who's this girl? And then she starts to describe the same exact girl that this last medium did, word for word, way of passing, her mother, all this stuff, and I was like, okay, all right, so she's okay, so it's real then, okay, and so yeah, that was uncomfortable. That was kind of a mess, but in the end, I had to end up kind of clearing her from the space, from at least the apartment that we were in. She hung out in the building, still created kind of chaos and things, but at least we didn't have to deal with her much. It was like much less severe. She would come into our dreams. It was a mess, and then it ended when we moved out. So that
Wow.
was another time I was like, yeah, this sucks. This was the same apartment that I like discovered mediumship in and stuff. So for me, I like kind of going back to something I said earlier, everything is training.
Yeah.
Like in a way, like I kind of needed that experience. I discovered my ability to do mediumship while living immersed in
Mm.
this energy, and was able to overcome it. So
Wow,
Yeah.
how crazy and incredible at the same time, but kind of creepy too.
Yeah, yeah. It
Yeah.
was thinking back on it, I'm like, man, like I'm kind of amazed that I even kind of got past that and got through it because it was every day she would terrorize us. And then like my partner at the time, she would jump into her kind of and like mess because their traumas were very resonant, if that
Hmm.
makes sense. So she
Yeah.
could like access her readily and easily. And that was the only way that she could get to me was through
Mhm.
her. So she would like tear. It was it was a mess. So I believe that she was responsible, at least like not. I'm not going to say wholly responsible, but majorly responsible for the death of one of our cats too at the time
Oh,
too. Yeah, yeah, because that's a whole another thing. Yeah, he was a protector. He tried to kind of help us and stuff, but in the end, he succumbed to it. So yeah, it was
wow.
painful and troubling, but at the same time, everything is training.
Yeah. Wow.
So,
What an incredible story. Thank you for sharing that and being vulnerable and sharing that story with us. And then you're still today doing what you're doing, even with
yeah.
those stories, and you can overcome anything, spirit or not, right? Listening to your story. So you hear sometimes that there's good spirits, there's bad spirits, and then people think that spirits can't do anything, but listening to that story sounds like they can. And is there different
So,
levels of strength
so
that they
I'll tell you this. Yes. So the only way that they can reach you is if your vibration is matching.
have?
So they'll do things. So this is how I learned this. So they can only harm you. They can only reach you, for example, if you're in a vibration of fear. So they might do things to keep you in a vibration of fear, whether they'll do it through other people or directly. Your
Ah.
job is to stay out of fear, to understand that they can only harm you if you're fearful. That this whole, like the whoever it was, Theodore Roosevelt, whoever it was, that like the only thing to fear is fear itself. It's absolutely true, because as long as you're out of fear, nothing can touch you.
Ah,
Nothing. So my advice to everybody who's afraid of these things:
yeah.
don't be afraid. Simply.
Interesting. Yeah, because the people I talk to that are afraid, they have like some crazy stuff happening, and then their fear level meter goes up and up. But how interesting is that? So everyone listening, stop being scared.
Stop
Period.
being scared. Like I know it sounds like wishy-washy and sing-songy, but like that is the actual answer. So for example, if you're in a point in your life where other things are happening, other things are going wrong, you are susceptible to kind of psychic attack kind of thing. Like you're susceptible. As long as you're working on that and focusing on solving for those things, you're
Mm,
completely safe. And even if you're encountered with these things, your job in those moments is to simply not be afraid.
mm,
Just understand that no matter what they try to make you think, they
mhm.
can't touch you. They're not allowed to. This
Yeah.
is kind of how vibration works. If you think about like a reverse magnet, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like a magnetic push. They
Yeah.
can't get in if you're not vibrating what they vibrate.
I see. So is it true if someone's vibrating lower that they're easier and more accessible than someone who's vibing a little bit higher?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. And the only
Mm,
reason why I was able to kind of be affected it was through my partner. Like I
yeah.
cared about her. I really wanted her to be happy and healthy. She had some kind of major
Mhm.
traumas that she was getting through, and I really was. I put my all into trying to solve for her stuff, and kind of almost wholeheartedly ignoring my stuff. And we all have stuff,
Yeah.
and that in and of itself put me in a low vibration, which left me susceptible. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you for sharing about your partner and bringing that in. So, in your opinion, why do you think people are so afraid of the term spiritual or the spiritual world?
The media. It's by
Mm,
design.
yeah.
But if we know what we're capable of, we cannot be mitigated and we cannot be controlled.
Hmm.
So by design, over the course of hundreds of years, we've been taught to be afraid of these things.
Hmm.
Because if you're afraid, guess what? You're susceptible and you're easily controlled.
Hmm.
And it's all about. I'm not going to go on a whole long thing about this, but it's all about power, and it's all about keeping this quote unquote balance of power. The
Yeah.
the people who are in charge right now do not benefit from us being empowered. So
Hmm.
they'll do everything that they can through music, through TV, through movies to keep us disempowered in order to keep themselves on top.
For sure.
So the short answer to that is it's by design. we're afraid because we've been trained to be afraid of it.
100%. You and I could probably do a whole nother episode on all that because I'm like totally, I see eye to eye with you on that. I talk to my husband about that every day. Like, do you see the commercials? Do you see what celebrities are saying? And it's like,
Hmm.
and I'm just a big believer that like people, you truly become what you watch and you become brainwashed. So
Absolutely.
yeah. And so I love that other people I talk to are talking about this more. And for people, they're afraid of what they don't know. And it's like, oh, spirits is creepy, spiritual. Oh, going to a medical physical shop, that's creepy. But it's like, says who? Who
Right.
says it's creepy? And who says anything's wrong being weird, right? Like, I think everyone should embrace their weirdness because that's what makes us unique, So I appreciate you coming on and bringing that in. So what would you say someone who's like, okay, I'm experiencing a mediumship, Maurice, but I don't want to. Can I shut it off?
Hmm. If you're experiencing, you might not like this answer, but if you're experiencing spirits, if you're perceiving spirits in the first place, you're meant to be.
Mm,
And in my opinion, it's not meant to be necessarily shut off, but it's meant to be controlled. So in other words, if you're wanting to not experience it in the way that you're doing, especially involuntarily, the only way out is like is through, and that's learning how to focus it
mhm,
and shut it on and off. And that's
mm,
going to take you kind of jumping in and learning it
mhm,
first. There's no way that you're going to experience these things and like it's done. I can't see. It's not really going to work like that. This is why
mm,
this is kind of an aside. I'll circle back. This is why a lot of people get into drugs, alcohol.
mm.
They're desperately trying to shut these things off subconsciously.
Yeah.
Like even me, I had, I used to drink a lot, and
Mhm.
looking back, like I had to stop drinking when I got sick in India. I think I mentioned it briefly when I got sick in India. Um, and this is kind of again, I'm like doing this loops back. One of the things that I did when I got sick in India, it wasn't just that I became sensitive. I mean, I did become sensitive, but like one of the things I had to do was stop drinking. It just
Mm,
wouldn't. I couldn't drink, and it was easy for me. I was like, I need to. I'm dying,
mm,
so I need to do something. And but what that did was it kind of peeled back this veil that I had been pouring over myself for most of my life. It made me realize, like, oh, is this part of the reason why I was drinking, so I wouldn't experience these things? And it
ah,
was. And I was trying to like drown it out. So I mean, you shouldn't, and it's unhealthy in so many other ways. But like
mm,
this is one way to block it out, and it's not a long-term solution. It'll only cause more damage in the end. The only way to kind of stop experiencing it is to learn what's happening,
mhm,
learn how to do it basically.
mhm,
And once you learn how to do it, once you learn the muscle, you find that you don't have to experience it all the time. Like for me,
mm.
I don't just walk around seeing things. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I set, and I guess this brings me to the next point. For me, I set a boundary. There was a time where I was like, okay, I'm only going to do this when
Mhm,
I designate the time and the space to do this. You're not going to come into my bed. You're not going to knock on my window.
yeah.
You're not going to walk into my. You're not going to do that. We're
Mm,
going to decide that we're going to meet at a certain place at a certain time whenever I do it. So like I guess one of the first things that you do is you actually create a boundary. Like you whether you
mm,
speak it out loud or internally, you create this boundary. And when you do it, it actually works. It seems kind of again sing song and simple, but if you've never done it before and you spend all the time just being afraid of it, of course it's just going to keep happening. You got to set the boundary. Um, for me, the way that I teach mediumship, for example, is I don't teach kind of augmented reality
mhm,
mediumship where they're like you see them in the room with you and they're sitting right there. I teach kind of I'll give different variations of this, but I'll walk you into either a room or another place, maybe in the forest or something, in your mind's eye, and you'll meet them here. So it's almost instead of meeting them in your bed, you're meeting them like at the mall. You know, you're meeting them at this public place where both of you can kind of come in and like sit down together and have this peaceful conversation rather than it feel hectic because they stepped into your world. So
Yeah.
this is another way that you can kind of keep it from like leaking into your 3D is creating the space internally, whether you create a room for yourself in your brain. This is how I started. It's kind of creating my own room inside my head where I meet them. And this kind of creates this kind of wall of separation that disallows it to just kind of happen involuntarily.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Yeah. I've talked to other mediums and they have not described that. So that's really cool. I love that,
Mm,
everyone's different, right? Like each
yeah,
medium is, you guys practice a little bit different. Things you do are a little bit different. So everyone who's listening, like every psychic's not the same. You guys are all a little bit
right.
different. Yeah.
Just
Wow.
there's as much variation in spiritual work as there is in humans. You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Because sometimes people try to put you guys in a box, like,
yeah.
okay, you're spiritual and whatever, but you're the same, but you guys aren't at all. And I like that you say that because, so is it true? I got to ask. So I hear this all the time, like something's happening in my house, gal, but if I don't acknowledge it, it just, it'll know that I'm not sensing it. Is that true?
No, no. It's something's happening in your house. Non-physical beings,
Mhm.
they know when you perceive them.
Mm,
They don't need ears and eyes and like the physical senses to do that. So if things are happening in your house, they'll likely just keep happening. You know, you
mm,
can get to a certain degree of being able to ignore it or accept it, I suppose, but
right.
it's gonna keep happening and you can either acknowledge it, you can try to do something about it, or you can leave.
Mm,
You know, those are really your options. Just kind of the example of me in that apartment. I wasn't meant to fix that problem.
right.
That building is the way it is
Mhm,
because it's kind of a hub for other people
mhm.
who are of that vibration to experience these things and go through their own training, whether they get through it or whether they don't, or they succumb to it. A lot of people succumb to it. It was interesting. Like quite a few people passed away while we were even living there.
How interesting.
Like, yeah, you know what I mean? Like, and oh, the building number was 911.
Get
Uh,
out.
d- right directly next door was like a home for troubled youth.
Mm,
Across was a like a nursing home for like mentally challenged people.
yeah.
Maybe like a quarter of a mile up the road was a hospital.
Mhm,
Around the corner was a firehouse,
mhm.
and then about a block away was a police station.
Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
yeah. So like that place, even on an energetic level, was kind of a hub for this kind of activity with that place at the center. And we ended up there because of what we were dealing with and what we were going through. You know what I mean? Like we
Yeah.
needed to be there, although it was it was hell a lot of the time. We ended up there because we needed to. So I wasn't meant to solve for the building's trouble. The building has its own purpose for the
Right.
people that end up there. Yeah. So sometimes the answer is to leave if it's bad. You know, I'm not one to say that you can always solve for it. Like you can. There are times where you're meant to actually solve for the energy in the place, but there are also times where you're not meant to solve, and that place is supposed to stand as it is.
Yeah, that how interesting is that? It almost sounds like you're describing like a little small town in a TV show or something, you know?
Mm.
Like, wow. So yeah, so you guys listening, just because you don't acknowledge it doesn't mean it doesn't know that you didn't feel that, whatever happened in your house. Because one of my friends was telling me like she went on vacation
Mm.
and she felt something touch her back and she was like, oh hell no, I'm not acknowledging this shit. I'm gonna go to sleep. But then it
Yeah.
kept happening. And then
Hmm.
she just found she went to sleep, but then the next night, then it touched her arm. And then she's like, no, if I'm not acknowledging it, it's fine. But listening to you, they still know.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Mm.
They have. Yeah, they don't sense the way that we do. Yeah, they have full
Yeah.
awareness of it, and simply not acknowledging is not gonna necessarily stop anything at all. No.
Right, right. Wow, how interesting that. So you guys, and don't be afraid. So what we're learning from this episode. Don't be afraid. And just acknowledging and ignoring it doesn't mean it's gonna go away. Mm. I like
I'm
how you
one
chuckle,
to
like, good luck.
yeah. Good luck if that's your method because I tried that. I'm only speaking from experience. I tried to
Yeah.
to not acknowledge it. Like you heard me kind of describe, like nah, whatever, it doesn't matter. Like that doesn't exist. But no, it's sure enough, it reared its ugly head over and over and over and over and over again, and until it was like, okay, time to go.
Right. Wow. How
you know?
interesting is that.
So,
So is someone is like, okay, they're not a believer in the spiritual world, because I heard this, and I'm gonna go by stage and I'm just gonna stage my house real quick. And
mhm.
then whatever's there is gonna go away. Does that actually work?
At times, yeah.
Mhm.
There are times where like I'm a big purveyor of like smudging and things, and
Okay.
I do it all the time. But it's typically not a one and done deal. It's typically something that you're gonna have to do
Mm.
pretty frequently. But it does help a lot, and it changes energy because, like for example, sage, it kind of shifts the vibration. So imagine that kind of the imagery of the reverse magnetic pull or the magnetic push.
Yeah.
You create this kind of barrier where they're like and they kind of like have to
Mm.
like they get pushed out. But if that initial vibration that they were resonant with is either still within you as a person or within the walls themselves, the physicality of the place,
Mhm.
it's they'll be back.
Oh, how interesting is that? You could be
Yeah,
staging for days, but they may come back.
yeah. It is possible to do home cleansings and things. Yeah,
Mhm.
like you can get a practitioner to actually cleanse the homes, and that does work a
Mm.
lot of the time.
Gotcha. Interesting you
But
say
I
that.
yeah.
Yeah, because
Mhm.
I've been to one of my friends' place, and he's like, "Yeah, my mom's stage and she did a ritual." And I was like, "Just so you know, there's still something here." I was like,
Yeah.
I'm like, "I don't do this for a living. I can just feel there's something here." And every time we would be there, the lights would flicker and things would just be off. And he's like, "No, no, no, no. He's not a believer." I'm like,
Mhm.
"You homie, you cannot tell me that is normal." Okay,
Yeah.
like let's be serious right now. Like your lights are always jacked up. Come on.
Yeah.
Right?
Mhm.
So I was like, "You might think I'm crazy, but actually you're crazy because you don't want to acknowledge it."
Right. It's just in denial because it's hard because when you live in a place, because again, I've experienced this too. It's hard to want to admit. It doesn't matter even if you do believe. It's hard
Yeah.
to admit to yourself that something's there with you. You don't want to believe that. I know I didn't. I tried not to believe it because like, what do you do? This is where you live and sleep.
True.
So like, I understand the sentiment. Like I'm not kind of I'm understanding of people who want to just not acknowledge it. Like I completely understand. But if you think if to answer the question, if is that a viable solution to the problem? No,
Mm.
no, it isn't.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah. So you keep trying, but it's not going to be long term.
right. But again, it is possible to actually clear homes. I've
Yeah.
seen it and I felt it done. It's
Okay.
just it's not 100%. It's not like what I mean. Even the most
Yeah.
seasoned practitioners who've been doing it for 40 years, who've cleansed hundreds of homes, thousands of homes, whatever. It doesn't always work. It doesn't always take.
Mm.
So
Oh, interesting. So could someone like book a session with you and like, "Hey, Maurice, I think something's here. Can you connect with it and get it to leave?" Like, what does it work that way, or could you
yeah.
help in some way?
Yeah, definitely. I would always be upfront and let them know whether or not that it was the case. Do you know
Mm.
what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I typically the way that I would do it is I would enter the home non-physically. I would like enter the home, kind of have a conversation with the spirit of the home itself and any other entity or being that I would perceive and kind of just like see first of all, see if they allow me to speak with them. If they don't allow me to speak with them, they're staying. Like I can't if they're already resistant to even having a conversation or connecting,
Mhm.
uh, it might prove to be difficult. I can try,
Mm.
and it may help, it may work, but again, doesn't always take. The most successful ones that I've had are ones that I've been able to connect with a being in spirit
Mhm.
and have a conversation with them and like ask them like what's going on, why are
Mm.
you here, what is it that you want or need, and kind of like try to help them with that need because usually they're hanging out for a reason. There's some sort of thing or need that they have, and especially being in a place where they've been unable to have the problem solved or even speak to anybody, they're
Mhm.
usually apt to kind of open up and have a conversation. It's the ones that are like completely resistant to
Yeah.
that don't really have an interest in leaving,
Mm.
and yeah, that then it becomes difficult because often it's another concept because what oftentimes happens is like when they've infused themselves that deeply into the home and there's a living person living in that home, a lot of the times they have made themselves kind of intertwined with the living person's energy in some way. So I, part of clearing will sometimes have to do with clearing what's in living person that's keeping the non-living being anchored into the home, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And, and that, of course, the living person has to be open to letting that go. If they're hanging on to that and unable to let that go, then I surely can't help. And you know what I mean? Because like there's like this like blending of the energies that I can't undo unless the living person is ready and willing to let go of whatever it is. It might be some sort of like old trauma that has nothing to do with the non-living
Yeah.
being. And you know what I mean? That maybe the non-living being has in common with the living person.
Oh,
And it's when you dissolve that link, you can call it like an energetic cord, for example. When you dissolve that cord, that now leaves the being unable to anchor itself into the person and or the home. So this is just one example. This is not always the case, but this is one example of like how a clearing would go for me.
interesting. So it doesn't even have to be that that's like someone's loved one, right? It could just be someone that attached to that living person, is what it sounds like.
Right, right. Either living person or the home itself, and then by way of the person living in the home now attached to the living person.
Gotcha. Wow. So what happens when someone who's living lost their loved one, but they don't want to let them go? So is that spirit stuck here or still hanging out here?
Depends. So a living person can't really keep a non-living person here, if that makes sense. So even so, for example, someone loses their mother
Mhm.
and the mother passes away, and then the living person can't let them go, quote unquote.
Yeah.
That non-living person,
Mhm.
uh, it's they're on their own journey. They'll likely pass all the way on. If they're anchored here, it's not because of necessarily because of the inability for the person to let the mother go.
Ah,
um it's so like, yeah, they can't really keep them here, but they can play a part in them staying, if that makes sense.
yeah.
So mediumship is not just a like people kind of think it's like kind of like a for show. It's like a thing that you do. It's like a thing that like you can show. It's a healing modality, just like anything else. It's a healing modality, just like Reiki. And
Mhm.
oftentimes, what happens in these sessions is that there's healing provided for the living person. Maybe
Mhm.
they get closure, they get the things that they need, but there's also healing provided for the non-living person
Mm.
who may still be trying to process the emotions of life that they haven't been able to before. And through the mediumship reading, they're able to do that. And what I've experienced many times actually is that people who are either bound
Mhm.
or are still kind of in the middle, kind of not fully having processed the life events, through the mediumship reading are able to release, let go, and finally pass all the way on. So a mediumship reading also can provide the ability for the spirit to pass all the way on if they're stuck.
Okay,
Mhm.
interesting. Yeah. I'm like, okay, you having stuff, talk to Maurice and you
Mhm.
like,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
like help clear some of that shit out.
Yeah. Mhm.
Wow, interesting. Thank you for bringing that in. And I like how you described that. Like, just because you're living and you don't want to let that person go, you don't have that much power
Right. Exactly.
to keep them
Exactly.
here. Okay.
Mhm. If they're
Wow.
here, they're kind of here by choice,
Ah,
or they're stuck for another reason. Like you can't like put a chain around them and keep them here. No, it
yeah.
doesn't work like that.
Right, right. And even if you did, right, most people probably can't even communicate with them,
Right.
right? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
And do you believe like everyone's a medium, everyone's a psychic? What is your thoughts on that? Or is it certain like are you born with this?
I believe that all humans, we are even on a physical level built to be able to do it.
Hmm.
Just our human bodies already can do it. Some of us have a higher propensity for it. Some
Mm-hmm.
of us are more natural. Some of us can do it right away and more readily and easily. This to me also has to do with genetics. I find that
Yeah.
certain people from certain places all over the world, and I say certain, but like most places all over the world, um, are naturally more spiritually gifted. So when you carry certain DNA, like, and not more spiritually gifted, but it's like more on the surface. Everyone. So in other words, everyone can do it. Everyone can exercise it and develop the skill. Everyone can. This is what I believe. But you a have to want to,
Mm-hmm.
and b have to know and like have faith that it's happening. But it's
Mm-hmm.
typically the like you'll find the people who are doing it involuntarily.
Mm-hmm.
uh, those are examples of the people who are kind of wearing the gift right on their sleeves, and they might as well just learn it, if nothing else, to be able to control when it happens and doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Circling back to that last question, so yeah, like my thoughts are that everyone has the capability to do it.
Mhm.
Um, not everyone will do it. Not everybody has to do it. and some people can do it more readily than others.
Yeah, I like that you describe it like that. So, because I always see as like, someone who is like, oh my gosh, you're a natural born gifted basketball player. But
Right.
it doesn't mean you become a professional just because you're good at it. You
Exactly.
still have to develop and practice and become better. So just like a medium, you may have that more naturally, but you still have to develop and practice.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. So you're not just
Just
waking
because.
up and doing readings, just because. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. And
Mhm.
it's quite honestly, like I never wanted this. It's not that I didn't, like, I had an aversion to it, but I
Yeah.
never actively wanted to do this. I meet some mediums and psychics and things, and they're like, "Yeah, I've been doing tarot since I was a kid, and I just always dreamed of being a witch." And like, I wasn't like that. Like,
Mhm.
I really, like, I just happened upon this. All I'm doing again is just following the breadcrumbs. I'm just following where I'm being guided, and I'm like, "Oh, okay, well, it's kind of working out." But I never wanted this. I wanted to be a musician. I wanted to be a chef, and I wanted to, write and do these other things,
Yeah.
all of which were kind of derailed for the sake of spiritual work. Not to say that I won't do those things, but
Right.
spiritual work for me was meant to be my base, in the same way that some people were meant to play baseball, in the same way some people were meant to be plumbers, first
Yeah.
and foremost. And that's my thing. My number one thing happens to be spiritual work, which is, it's still wild to me to think about, but it's undeniable.
Right. Wow. How amazing is that? So yeah, you're right. I have heard people like, yeah, I seen that psychic and I always knew I was gonna be one. But to hear your perspective, which is the complete opposite, like I didn't always really necessarily want to do this.
No, it was only literally 2020 when I
Mhm.
was like, okay, I guess I'll be a professional psychic. That's when I kind of accepted it. Though it's been happening kind of over the course of my entire life. I never, first of all, back then I wasn't even, I thought it was normal. Like, I didn't think, I didn't have any working examples of anything, and especially, like, all my family's gifted, but
Yeah.
all of them were kind of starkly afraid of it. Come to find out later once I'm talking to them about it. But all my family's gifted, like, and this is another thing I do want to say to people too, is that, like, you have a gift, you're not special.
Hmm.
Like, let me just make
Yeah.
that clear. You're not special. Like, first of all, you have what you have because of your parents, and then your parents' parents, then your parents' parents' parents. Like, you inherited this. You're not special. Like, I want to make that clear,
Mhm.
because, like, me, like, I didn't just like pop out of nowhere and I can do this thing. Like, no, no, no. Like, both my mother and my father were incredibly gifted. They channeled their gifts in different ways, and also blotted their kind of psychic gifts out in other ways.
Yeah.
They like to drink, both of them,
Yeah.
and they and the rest of my family has always been like that. And, like, thinking back, I'm like, oh, it makes a lot of sense. It's not weird that I've been like this. The last person I found out much later to
Mhm.
practice spiritual work actively was my great great grandfather.
Wow.
And finding that out, I was like, oh, so I'm not weird. Like, I needed that to even continue on my spiritual journey, to hear that. My late grandmother told me that he used to read her palms, he used to interpret her dreams, and he used to read for her, like, do psychic readings for her. And he told me himself, um, in a mediumship session,
Um,
that he it had to be me. Like, I was the chosen one to be able to, like, actually continue on with my family's gift.
yeah.
And it's heavy, it's a heavy burden, but, like, don't really have a choice. No, it's not that I don't have a choice. You always have a choice, but it's the path of least resistance. you
Yes.
know Following through with that. So yeah.
Wow, amazing. Yeah. So if people just slow down a minute, start to look at your own history in your family, right? Like, start to see that other people and the things that they were doing kind of makes sense, like your story. So I love that you bring that in because I really resonate with that. So I'm like, hey, you're like speaking about my story right now.
Yeah.
Like, how did you know? No. So Maurice, what last piece of advice would you like to give to listeners who are like, okay, I'm kind of afraid of it, but I'm kind of interested at the same time. What do I do?
Throughout every day, we receive what I started calling little nudges,
Mhm.
little pushes to do little things.
Mhm.
People think that the guidance that we receive is supposed to be loud and obnoxious and like a plastered sign in front of our faces. But oftentimes, the most profound and necessary steps that we need to take are these tiny little nudges. Maybe I should go outside.
Mm.
Maybe I should have a glass of water. Maybe I should, I don't know. Maybe I should, like, rearrange my room or something, like these little nudges. And then like it's those times where we're like, nah, I don't feel like it.
Yeah.
Follow the little nudges is my advice. Those
Mm,
little nudges that you get, they might seem completely unrelated to spiritual work or anything else that you're trying to achieve. Follow those little nudges. Each one of those things is an essential step in the direction of what you're trying to do and where you're trying to go. Um, yeah, I won't even elaborate on that. Just follow the little nudges and you'll see. It'll
I
lead you
love
to where you
that.
need to be.
I'm gonna use that. Like I'm gonna remember that Maurice said, follow those nudges. Yeah, so thank you. That's perfect. So let
Mm.
everybody know how they can find you, get in touch with you, and learn a little more about you.
So you can email me at ancientmademodern
Mhm.
at gmail.com. Ancientmademodern@gmail.com is my email. You can find me on Instagram at ancient.made.modern.
Mhm.
I'm also on Facebook, I think now. Yeah, I'm on Facebook. You can just Maurice Sinclair. You'll see
Mhm.
my face pop up. And yeah, you can start there. Those are three good ways to contact me readily and easily, and I can direct you anywhere that you need to be. Also, I have a website,
Mhm.
ancientmademodern.com. You can find me there too. And yeah, feel free to reach out, everybody.
Mhm.
And oh, and I guess I should be clear about this because people oftentimes have reservation about reaching out to me.
Yeah.
Please feel free to reach out, first of all, and second, if you're wanting to reach out and even just have a conversation about what I could possibly do for you, that's completely free too. That
Mhm.
I don't charge you for like I guess what people call a consultation. Yeah, I'm more than happy to talk it through with you.
I love that. So, and don't worry, guys, I'll put the links to make it easy because I know how people are. If it's difficult to find you, they're like, forget it. So, thank you so much, Maurice, for your time, your knowledge, and your stories. Like, I found it super interesting, and I really enjoy this time with you. So, I really appreciate you. Thank you.
Likewise, thank you so much for having me. This is fun.
Oh, awesome. Thank you.